Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us today in the GRC room for how to manage cyber risk and compliance. I'm Mike Andrews here once again with Karina Klever of Klever Compliance, and we're happy to welcome Dr. Victor Monga, who is the president of the Cloud Security Alliance for Los Angeles and Southern California. He's also a SOC Domain Consultant for Palo Alto Networks and so much more. So there's a lot to talk about here, but before we get moving, just a couple of notes. Please feel free to leave a comment, and if we don't get to it while we're live, we'll get to it shortly after. Also, if you haven't already, please check out the GRC Room YouTube channel, where you'll find this webinar, all our other ones, and other content as well. So without further ado, let me pass it to Karina for a brief introduction, then we'll learn more about Victor.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Karina Klever, founder of Klever Compliance. We are a compliance management as a service provider. We deal with a lot of vendor things and toolard things, and really just help our clients from an advisory perspective on getting ready for certifications and audits. So, Dr. Victor Monga, thank you so much for joining us. So happy to have you. Our first question really is for you. Tell us a little bit about your cyber risk and compliance journey.
Yeah, Karina, thank you for having me. And my journey actually started with one simple thing, which was my manager walked into my office and said, "Hey, Victor, tomorrow we have an audit." And I worked for an aerospace company back in the days, and it was ITAR. And from a government perspective, they're coming and they're going to actually audit us. And I had no idea. What do you mean? I'm trained by a network security engineer. I'm a security architect. I take care of all the tools and technologies. You talk to me about all of that, but all of a sudden there's a compliant component. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's the first time I actually understood what we do, how it relates to compliance, how it relates to risk. And that's how I started my journey in risk and compliance, to really understand that GRC, when we talk about governance, risk, and compliance, what does that mean and how does it relate? That was my first time actually looking at a compliance report and realizing the controls and what we do from the tactical, how it actually translates into those controls and governance. So that was my first journey into that compliance world, if you will.
Oh, sorry, can't hear you, Mike.
Sorry, go ahead, Karina.
I was going to say I had something similar in 2002 when an old boss called. I was a PMO director and said, "I need you to get these auditors off my back." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I have no idea what." And then he says, "Name your price." And I got them ready for Sarbanes-Oxley, and that was 2002. So same kind of situation. You just kind of get thrown into it.
Yeah. Right.
That's kind of a good way to get into it, though, because you saw firsthand what happens when you haven't thought about these things previously. So that probably guided you and helped you be more proactive than some other people would if they were at an organization that was more forward thinking about these things.
And Mike, I'll add one thing. My boss at that time, the way he mentored me in the compliance world, and he said that compliance is a snapshot in time. Risk is a living, breathing thing. And that really ingrained in me when I'm looking at and considering compliance and talking about compliance, because a lot of time, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this at this webinar, where when we look at it, that's just a snapshot in time. That's exactly what happened, how the controls were working. But risk is what we start living and breathing and adopting. So that's one thing I want to give it out to all of my listeners here as well, that when you're thinking about compliance, that's just a snapshot in time. But the risk is what you live and breathe.
Yeah, completely agree. It's crazy how many companies get that backwards. So you've had a lot of different roles. You've founded companies. While dealing with cyber risk and compliance, what was a big lesson that just came as a surprise to you?
So I'll share my unsuccessful compliance story, and then I'll talk about the lessons learned. So I always thought compliance is a legal game, which is if I don't do it, then I get into legal problems, or get the attorneys, get those auditors involved early on, and try to make it in a fashion where now I have to be compliant because I need to be legally held responsible. But what I really learned over the years as I started adopting and evolving into the risk and governance, which is risk management is more like a psychological game, not just a legal one. You can have the most robust compliance framework in the world, but if your team go signs documents or bypass security because it's too slow, it's not working, all of those frameworks are useless. And that's a lesson that I've learned the hard way, because a lot of time when you ask a question, hey, how about this control? When did we review it last time? And if the answer was last week and we didn't do it consistently, you're going to fail. And then it becomes a legal conversation. So instead of that, again, the riskiest thing a compliance officer can do is say no too often. And that's what we want to avoid as well. So my lessons learned is risk management, continue ingrain in every process throughout the organization, not just IT, not just security. And again, Karina, you preach that every day to us. Make sure that the risk management and the governance and compliance is everybody's responsibility, and they're aware of it, their responsibility piece in this larger piece and in larger game.
Well, it comes back to, really so risk is a culmination of a failed control. If your document stack isn't properly reflecting your actual operations, you don't know what your controls are, and you don't know that they failed.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that they failed, you can't manage the severity of the failure. How badly do I care that this failed? Is this failure, let's just go back and update the documents. It's really not a big deal. Or maybe it is a really huge deal. We need to recalibrate how we do this workflow and how this control is capturing its success or failure, which leads to your risk management, right? So, I think that so much of our GRC world has been built on ethereal statements that are trying to be all-encompassing in this checkbox compliance kind of approach. But unfortunately, the reality is we still need to actually have statements in our documents, in our published documents, that are truly reflective of our operations.
And one of the things that I will add to that, Karina, exactly if you find, a lot of those documents also I've seen where it's still in draft state.
Yeah.
And we are using this as a placeholder. Every time you ask me about a policy, yes, we have it, but it's in draft. That piece needs to be removed. Either you have it or you don't.
Yeah.
Let's not keep that draft phase, because it's not helping us to get anywhere. When the compliance comes, it's either you have it or you don't. The middle part where you think that warm and fuzzy feeling about, oh, draft phrase, I still need to finalize. Either you have it or you don't. Just be deterministic about it. Be firm about it. Be bold about it.
Well, some of those things I found come from the kind of way back in the day, the executives that say, well, if we don't have the policies, the auditor can't ask us for it. So they can't get us on anything, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that mentality from decades ago still exists.
Yeah.
And people keep these documents in this mediary kind of phase so there's no gotcha. And you got to understand that the auditors many times, okay, sure, yes, they're there to do a job, right? But if you handle kind of the readiness phase the right way and get a coach on your team that drills your team, that says, hey, here's how we're going to help you be successful when the auditor does show up, right?
Yeah.
That's where you have that opportunity to refine those documents and those controls.
And in my book, honestly, if you are asking your team for a control when auditor has showed up, you're too late. I'm sorry.
Oh, too late. Way too late. Yeah.
Exactly. If you have not been preparing your team, you have not been asking those questions already out of that audit. If they are here and you go to your team, exactly what happened to me, and I learned it, that I need to prove these controls, it's too late. Yes, I learned a great way. I learned about the compliance. But again, that's not the ideal way. That's not the preferred way, if you will.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us, Victor. So now we're going to ask some questions to, going to kind of bounce it around to both Victor and Karina. Karina, let's start with you for this first question. So a startup realizes they need to tend to cyber risk and compliance. And maybe it's because they lost a deal, they had a close call, maybe they had a data breach. So how should they get started?
So a few different things. number one is data classification. You should have 4 different types of data, and your most important data is probably realistically about 5% of your entire data set. Now, there is no reason for you to go and encrypt publicly available data. Get rid of it. Get rid of it in 2 weeks. Don't increase your data set. Take that data classification and now map it. Map it to your vendors, map it internally, and then have exact provisions around each type of data. Some type of data needs to be encrypted. Some type of data needs more stringent access control. Some type of data needs to be more carefully monitored when it comes to relinquishing it over to the vendor. The second thing is that inventory, right? Inventory all day long. Keep it current. There are some clients, unfortunately, who just choose to not do this. They relinquish everything to kind of a cloud provider, and it's kind of one of these. They handle it over there. We pay the money. So they're not the ones that are going to go in front of a judge. You are, because they're your business controls that are operationalizing that solution. So you have to be accountable for understanding what it says in that contract, asking whether or not that vendor actually takes your data and relinquishes it over to their vendor. So now you're getting into third and fourth party. Remember, your breach commitment notification and your contractual obligation stops with that vendor. And when you blindly sign at that contractual level that your data could be passed to whoever they want to pass it to, and you don't raise your hand and say, wait a minute, who is that? What are they going to do with that? What are their access controls? Where are they going to be putting my data? Is there redundancy? All of these questions. So the most important things are, again, data classification, the incident management. And so with incident, I'm talking about all of the alerts, right? Your vulnerability alerts, your pen testing alerts, your whoever you've hired to do scanning, whatever other kind of alerts. I'm just assuming that everything is sitting inside your incident management, your vendor management. I think focusing in on those 3 areas is going to get you very far ahead from just kind of the basic run-of-the-mill problems that we're seeing all the time on the tail end. So when an event has happened, many times it comes back to one of those 3 things missing.
Yeah, I'll tag along, Karina, if you allow me. Exactly what you said. Inventory first, software mapping your data. One thing I have realized in last year, I was helping one of the companies to go through CMMC readiness, and startup company they want to achieve that. But one thing, I sat down with the founder/CEO and I said, "What is risk to you? CMMC is your compliance. What is risk to you?" And that's where we started at literally writing down on the whiteboard, which is right in front of his monitor, so that he can really visualize it. He can see it. And from there, if I asked a question about data mapping, and usually answer for startup companies, again, there might be unicorns, but most of them is, that emoji. Data what? Classification what? Mapping what? And I understand they have to go on a lightning speed, especially if you're a startup, you're running lean, you're not thinking about all the hygiene stuff that a corporate would. I totally get it. At the end of the day, if you need to drive the car, you need to adhere by the rules. If you're in residential, whatever the speed limit is, if the school zone, you're to drive that car. You cannot go just because you have the fast car and you want to go fast. That's not how it works. When you are in the compliance world, you got to play by the rules.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what a lot of the startup founders, because they have gained success, they have gained popularity, they have seen the revenue now, if you will, they miss that part, that I can do whatever I want, not in compliance world. I'm sorry. This is where you have to play by the rules, because rules are defined either by a statutory or a regulatory body, whichever way you want to go. You have to play by that rule, and which means exactly what Karina said. Inventory first. Don't just buy tools or softwares. Start mapping your data. Again, Karina, I'm repeating what you said. You can't really protect what you don't see. I know there are a lot of memes out there. Ask, what data do we have? And then which one is important, which one is not. 4 categories, 5 categories, whichever way, the buckets. And that's what I want most of the startup people to visualize. have that buckets in front of your monitor or whiteboard. Start thinking about it. If it's a customer data, well, it goes in this bucket. If it's a public information about my company event, it goes in that bucket. That's how you start visualizing, and that's what you need to actually preach to your company, even if it's 20 people or 200 people. You need to inform that. It cannot stay in that office. It can't just stay in IT or security or CEO's office. It can't just stay there. It needs to be communicated to your company. Single one of your employees needs to learn those buckets, because when they are actually operating and exercising that data, they can actually visualize those buckets and apply the controls what they need to. If they are sending an email, maybe they click on that little sensitive button. If they are actually updating the website, they know it's something public information. I don't need to go through those controls. So again, that least privilege policy or least privilege mindset, it can't just stay in one office. It needs to be embedded into every one of the employees or the people who actually exercise the data in your company, contractors included, vendors included. They need to know how you think about cyber risk and compliance. And that's what I would say. How do they get started, or where do they get started? A startup starts there, defining those buckets, because without that, they'll just always have that vague sense of security. And when the compliance time comes, they're going to fudge that data, and we don't want that for you.
So I'm going to add one more thing. I know we need to get to the next question. I'm sorry, but I just want to make this very tangible for anyone that's listening. The buckets are, if you have anything that identifies a consumer, personally identifiable information, grab their name and the state that they are associated with. There are a lot of states right now that are out there who have consumer privacy enactment entitlements for their residents, right? This is your CCPAs and, all of the different, I think we're like up to 20 states now. That's the first. PHI, personal health information, and SPI, sensitive personal information, is a HIPAA requirement. If you're in healthcare, a doctor, insurance, anything that may identify someone's health information, that's a different bucket. Next bucket, financials, Sarbanes-Oxley, right? So if you're publicly traded, and even if you're not, you want to keep your financial data separate. This is a tag that you're going to be using. If you're, for instance, in an airline firm or a company, there's going to be FAA requirements. If you're a bank, there's going to be GLBA requirements. So anything to do with money in combination with that person. So depending on the industry that you're in, you should know your buckets. If you're more of a startup and you're gathering just data, make sure that you've categorized and flagged that data appropriately, so that if that consumer privacy request come and hits your door and you've got 45 days to fulfill that request from a California resident, or 15 days to remove them from marketing, you have a track of it coming in, you fulfilling it, and it being closed in case you're ever asked.
That's a really good point, Karina. Exactly why compliance and why the governance in companies exist, exactly for that. When someone is asking you to remove their personal information from your website or from that marketing email list, and you need to know where it exists and where else is mapped, so that way you can process that request efficiently.
And it makes it easy, right? It makes it easy because you want to know exactly where that data is, so that you just go straight to it, get rid of it at the backup, and you move on, right? I mean, instead of going and like being in a dark room blindfolded, scaling the walls, I wonder where this data is.
Yeah, that was a great exchange. So, Victor, you've held a lot of different roles. At a startup or SMB you've been around, what's the biggest cyber risk and compliance breakdown you recall seeing?
Ooh, yeah. Well, SMB is my expertise when it comes to it. So I'll start with this one. I conducted actually a research last year, and what's biggest cyber risk you asked, or compliance breakdown? They don't know. When you ask that question to most of the SMBs, they have some IT, they have some security, but for especially SMBs, if you ask them what's my biggest risk, they're like, well, as long as my company is running and my people are getting paid, I'm good. My risk is not getting paid. My risk is my company is getting shut down. So that's the the first step, how they are envisioning their risk, but then you start asking them. The biggest risk, what I have seen for most of the companies or SMB space, is ghost employee access, where you have employee, you've given them access, literally top tier access to most of your to your platforms. And a lot of the SMBs actually, they try to have the shared access to not having to pay for the extra cost of the license. That's a very common use case. I'll actually share a use case or a story. We had a DoD contractor, SMB, 42 people company, growing decently, and one of the employees had access to all of their accounting, like QuickBooks. She was managing their QuickBooks, and when she left, the access was never removed, password was never changed because it was using a shared email. Think of this like quickbooks@victor.com. Now imagine if that employee is disgruntled. That employee actually goes to competitor. That employee actually goes home and try to put their ACH information and issue money. That's the kind of risk that we are dealing with here with SMBs. Ghost employee access. It's almost always offboarding. Onboarding is easy for SMBs. Hey, I have a new employee. I want a new computer. I want email access for them. I want them to access my supplier portal. I want them to access my vendor portal. I want them to access to my shop floors. I'm referring a lot of these manufacturing SMBs, if you will. But ultimately, it's the access is easy to give. But when they are leaving your company, that exit interview that a corporate would employ, that they'll make sure that the single sign-on is turned off or anything else, they are deactivating the account. For SMB, it's like settle your paycheck and thank you very much.
Yeah.
You still have all that access. So I've seen companies with world-class encryption in SMB world, they consider world-class, that forgot to deactivate a disgruntled salesperson CRM access or engineers GitHub access or permissions. So that person walks out the door with the keys to the castle still in their pocket. So it's a process failure, not a technical one. You can have the best technologies, but if the process is not there, and that's what I see with SMBs and startups, the lack of process, not so much technology, not so much people.
And I think to add to that, even moving outside of the SMB space, in very large companies, consultants actually bypass HR triggers.
Yes.
They're usually brought on directly by the hiring manager. And at some point, money runs out or the time runs out or the project ends. That hiring manager forgets to submit the offboarding request, right? I have literally myself personally accessed former client very highly accessed infrastructure components months after my engagement has ended, and I call, and luckily it's me, right? But I call them and I'm like, hey, you forgot to offboard me. You forgot to please kill my, I don't want to have your access.
Right.
I don't want to have access to it. So so I always recommend having least privilege permissions and segregation of duties aligned to actual HR job functions and titles. Have that mapped out so you're never replicating someone's access. So when a new financial analyst comes in, Paul, you're not replicating Susie's access. You're giving them the permissions appropriate for a financial analyst.
Yes.
That's it, right? And anything above that now requires that approval from that authorizing manager.
100%. For SMBs, again, I'm looking at all of my SMBs audience here, where you might not have the process nailed down or matured just yet. You might be managing access still on Excel sheet. What access Victor has, maybe Karina needs it. You can still do it, but have that ingrained. Maybe write it down on a sticky note or somewhere. Make sure that person who is getting the access, that's documented somewhere. And when they get more access, that also documented somewhere, so that when they're leaving the company, you can go by the checklist. Exactly. So you don't need to have the old fancy rules. You don't have to have the best tools, but you need to have the inventory of the access that I have at your company, because I am exercising your data, which in extension, I might have sensitive information access that I no longer are privileged once I leave after your company employment. It is in your best interest to actually disable my access. So a lot of the employees, Sure, maybe you can help your employers as well. Create a quick sheet. And every time you get access to emails, to Salesforce or the CRM information or the Canvas or whatever access you're getting, IT, non-IT related, have a sheet ready. And when you're leaving, maybe help your SMB manager that, hey, this is what I have access. Make sure to deactivate. It's in your best interest as well. Karina is one of the good ones. She reported that access. You can do the same. You can follow Karina's footsteps and report that I still have access. I shouldn't. Please deactivate it. Because when breach occurs, they're going to look at who had access to it. You might get subpoena. You might get that letter that you don't want to see it. So it's, as an employee, it's in your best interest as well to inform your employers or previous employers that I no longer need this access.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. You know, companies are really good about making the accounts, collecting the data, but like you said, it's a lot less of a priority to get rid of the data when you no longer need to retain it and to shut down those accounts. Matter of fact, a few months back on LinkedIn, I saw the co-founder of a company that like they help you do user access reviews, and they brought up someone in cybersecurity having to go on LinkedIn and see who's still with the company. I'm like, what? Like that? No. You need to talk to HR. If your company's that big, you probably have an HR.
Right.
Just ask them who's with the company. You know, come up with an onboarding, offboarding process. Like that's a sign of a deeper issue. But
so maybe one more thing to add to that really quickly. Access is, remember, logical, physical, system to system. Have the inventory of the APIs as well. Recent situation for us, we walked into a client, they have an API they turned on 8 years ago. The contract with that vendor ended 3 years ago.
Wow.
The API is still shuffling a whole bunch of data, sensitive data, out to who knows where. Nobody has the password, right? Everybody's afraid to shut it off. Again, inventory. But the access that's involved with APIs is also very sensitive. In hindsight, when you're sitting at a conference room with 3 and 4 letter agencies and the insurance has been called and everybody hasn't slept in 3 days, and you start looking at those logs, the signatures have always been there, folks.
Yeah.
It's just we didn't check them because we didn't have the right controls. Controls are not for the auditor. The controls are for you to manage your operations the right way so you can notice these things and spot them and action them.
Yeah. Great points. So the next question's one of a topic that I know Karina likes, so we'll go with Karina first. Karina, companies often think about strategy or tools, but not both. So what's the right way to approach this?
You got to approach both, right? Look at your growth projection, your collapse projections, your future projections. You take your 12,000 row list of controls that, came from that combination of regulations and frameworks. Make sure that they're appropriate for where you are. We have this thing called N to the 4th. So now, next, near, never. So that input is that big, long spreadsheet. And then we figure out what's our low-hanging fruit. What are we doing right now? Because we're doing a whole bunch of stuff. What are the controls that we're already doing that we can get credit for, right? What are we going to be doing in a year? Let's assign a project manager. Let's assign an owner. Let's make sure everybody knows about this one, right? Strategy on your roadmap, near 3 to 5 years. There's also a never. Never is... the example I always use is there's a requirement in the FDA to, if you make goat milk ice cream, you have to use goat milk. Well, the pharmaceutical company I was at, they have to abide by the FDA, but they never made goat milk, right? So although it is a regulatory requirement, explain why this doesn't apply to you. Get it off your list of tracking instead of sending 70 people over to the office, walking around aimlessly in the hallways, looking for a control that doesn't even exist. We don't make goat milk ice cream. Kill it. right? Be wise with your time. And then there's toolard. So just be really careful with this legacy layering of, one C-level comes in, they love that tool. A different one comes in, well, they love that other one. This different one comes in. Meanwhile, the people working on these tools are swivel chairing their mind away. Cybersecurity burnouts are really, really real thing, but you got to understand on the back end, people are being asked to work on 3, 5, 7 tools. And then if they're all tracking important stuff, which one's the most important? And what should be your tiebreaker? Data classification. If you have not lined up your data classification the right way and something fails, you don't know what to focus on. So we're creating these problems for ourselves just from too much of everything.
I'll tag along here, Karina, if Mike allows me. So I come from the engineering background. I always gravitate towards the new shiny tool because that's my comfort space, if you will. However, when it comes to GRC, and when we look at the problem between how do we actually make sure my tactical plan of the security align with the compliance, because usually it's always the other way around. Like, as long as I have a compliance, well, I'm secure. You're not. I'm sorry, you're not. So the tools part, it always comes with, I have a simple theory. Excuse me. If all of your controls that you have inventory actually encourage your operators and users to look at it. So instead of a compliance person comes in and asks you, show me that you have reviewed logs for this web server, actually the other way around. Where do we keep our logs? How do we rotate them? How do we manage them? What's the retention policy? Put that on the tool operators as well a little bit. So they are actually invested in the game here, so that we're not treating them as almost come in and show me your ticket and you can watch the movie. No, you're invested. We are making the movie with you here. So that's one thing I have realized, especially with the SMB market, because there's not a whole lot of IT people, let alone single. Usually they have on-call person who comes in when they need someone, or even 1 or 2 people who are sharing database administrator, IT administrator, security administrator, web server administrator. You pick every single administrator and they have the title. So if that's the case, compliance, make them part of it, so that when the right time comes, they also understand why we're implementing these controls in this way, because it achieves this part of the control. And that's where don't buy tools right away. For my SMB listeners, please don't buy tools right away. You don't need tools. What you really need is actually looking at what you need to do the controls perspective. Exactly, Karina said. Half the things you may think you need to do it, maybe you don't need to do it. So you need an advisor like Karina to come in, actually inventory the controls that's relevant to you. Then you will buy the tools which will actually help you achieve those controls. And you will invest in that one personnel or resource who will be part of that journey to achieve those controls and ultimately compliance.
Yeah. So important.
Yeah, so we've talked about people at smaller companies, people wearing multiple hats, they have multiple roles. So Victor, say you have a SaaS startup and they have one engineer that handles development, they do the IT. Should they be handling cybersecurity as well?
If you don't have a choice, what are you going to do? That's a short answer. Long answer, I don't think so. You shouldn't have a single person, same person, judge, jury, and executioner. That's just bad approach. That's from medieval time, that you don't want to have the same person making the rules and enforcing it as well. That's why we have different departments, right? So if you can't afford, maybe consider a VCISO. If you can't afford a full-time security person, consider a VCISO who comes in, gives you the strategy, and that your IT person actually enforcing it or making sure. Or the other way around. Maybe your IT person needs enablement. You hire a contractor, you hire a consultant, get them trained on it. But now your IT, your in-house person is actually making sure that when the rules are enforced, whatever the violations are, they are translating to business in their terms. What I have seen when you have same person or even 2-person or 3-person team doing a lot of roles is they start playing God.
Yeah.
Because they think they have access to everything, so they should make the rules of this engagement, and they will enforce the users. What comes with that? My favoritism. If I'm an IT person for a smaller company, I manage all the accesses. Maybe I'll leave an access open for Betty. Why? Because I like her. Maybe Jason comes to me, we go hang out at the bar around the corner after work. Maybe he needs access, but his manager said no, but I'm going to give it to him. Why? Because I like him. That's what happens. Because the person who is giving access is also checking the access. And that's where I don't think it's a good idea. The person who is actually executing and providing the access, or IT operations, if you will, or even security operations, is the one validating it. So that's where I always encourage most of my SMB customers that I advise to, that if you can't afford full time, get a quarterly, monthly, biannually, but have someone else, because that persona will always be used whenever the conversation comes that, well, Victor's going to come and take a look at it, who had access to what, and he's going to write me a report. And that's not going to look good, because my CEO is going to ask me, why did you give access to Jason and Betty? So that's where I feel that having that external, or even that persona, which is separation of duty, just helps with the psychology. And as I said, that risk is all about psychology. So it's not just about the legal game. It's not just about the technical control. It's a psychology. How do you actually make sure that people know how to actually enforce and validate?
Thank you so much, Victor. Can I add to that really quickly? 100% spot on all of those. So access is born, again, with those titles and those roles that you need to align the system and a level of permission to. Segregation of duties is a really, really real thing, right? Because when Karina submits a change request that says put $1 million in her account, and she does the coding that says put the $1 million in her account, and she signs off on that, and the same Karina goes and does the QA approval, and the same Karina comes in and says, I approve this for release.
Right.
And there's been nobody to come in at any of those points to say, wait a minute, this sounds a little weird. Why'd Karina get $1 million into her account? And there's been nobody else that's actually rationalized out those requirements. This started in the finance world, right? This is a publicly traded requirement going back to your SSAE 16s, 18s, right? Right. And so rightfully so, you can't have the same person that writes the check be the one that approves the check, and then a different person puts it in the ledger. But the same exact concept applies today for things that we do in our environments and things that we have access to. The other thing is, if you give everyone all of the keys, you're creating a single point of failure. So many years ago, I had a gentleman who worked for me. I kept begging him to document everything. And the day before he left the office, I said, Robert, but what if you get hit by a truck? And unfortunately, the next morning, I got a call from the CHP that said he got run off of into a ditch by a semi truck, was in the hospital for 12 weeks, like 40 some broken bones. I have never said, what if you get hit by the bus again? I always say, what if you win the lottery? So if you've created a single point of failure and you've given that one human everything and all of the keys to the kingdom, and that person goes, buys a lottery ticket and doesn't show up the next day, what kind of a situation have you put yourself into as far as your business continuity? You've now relinquished critical operational functions to this person who may never show up, right? And maybe they're nice enough to call and say, hey, here's all the passwords. Yeah. However, it is your duty as part of running that business, small or big, to understand exactly what the functions are and not create those single points of failure. Yes, hire somebody to come in for 10 hours a month to collect that evidence, right? Because then they know what they're doing, and you haven't actually pinned anybody in your organization to maybe what you consider as a compromising situation.
Yeah, Karina, I'll say one thing. I used to have a phrase, are we audit ready? So instead of the catch up, are we audit ready? And that goes exactly to what you're saying. Audit ready means that someone is actually reviewing what I'm doing. So if I can't afford a full-time auditor, I can't afford a full-time CISO, I can't afford a full-time CRO, 10 hours, 20 hours, whatever you can afford, bring them on board, because then you are actually working towards your audit ready.
Yeah, even if it's a lot less than 10 hours a month, you can still accomplish a lot. because if it's the same person doing everything, it's hard for the business leadership to have assurance that things are going well. I've been around IT personnel for a lot longer than I've been in cybersecurity,
Yeah.
and they're the ones with the hands on keyboards. So if something went right or something went wrong, there's a fair chance that they're the one that was involved in that. So there's nothing wrong with finding the issues and dealing with them. Next one, we'll go to Victor. So lots of companies, they want SOC 2 or ISO 27001 so they can close deals. There's a lot of ways to pursue this. We don't have time for that, but let's hear, Victor, what's a big pitfall that they should avoid when pursuing either of those?
So when you're pursuing any compliance, the pitfall is, first of all, not knowing why you're doing it. What's the value to doing it? So a lot of time it's aspiration that the CEO said we should do SOC 2, or if we do it, maybe my customers I will have better contracts. If you're not clear about it, you cannot communicate that to your staff or your employees, your contractors. That's just, again, bad management from the beginning. The motivation of that compliance has to be very clear, because that's what's going to be anchoring every time we ask data classification, mapping. All of those things will actually go back to the one thing. Why did we want to do this to begin with? So that's one thing I always encourage, that that if you are going towards compliance and you want to have SOC 2, great for you. But now you're going to have data classification. Now you're going to have to invest time, money, and you have to change some policies, processes. All of that would have to anchor to one thing. Why are we doing it? It's a funny thing. We go to Mexico a lot, and there's a resort actually recently. We bought into their timeshare or whatever. And they've been asking us every time we go there, they're like, hey, we want you to buy in so that you don't have to pay for every time the same amount of money that you do. And that's one thing they did. They actually asked me, why would you want to buy in? It could have been like, well, you've been hounding me, but that's not good enough. You have to be clear about it, why you're buying in. And so they make you like enlist those things, maybe reduction in cost, maybe have flexibility in the dates, and maybe all inclusive, whatever that reasons are. They give you that as part of the receipt. Literally, receipt is attached to those motivations, because when you look at the receipt, you are clear about why you bought in. And that's exactly what I tell about compliance. You need to be clear about it, why you're doing it. You can have the aspirations. I want to do SOC 2. I want to do all ISOs. I want to do all these things. Great. Are you ready to make the change in your company? Are you ready to invest the time? Are you ready to invest the money? Are you ready to actually ask your department heads to make changes in the processes? If the answer is no, that means the motivation was not there to begin with. And the reason has to be there. And that reason is the receipt. The controls goes into each process change, technical change, people change. That needs to be attached every time that goes into the communication. Small business or large business, enterprises, that motivation that has to be there. Why are we doing compliance?
And some of it might even just be, we want to put some good practices in place. We just want to be secure and safer, and and it could be financial. We want more business, or the cyber insurance company won't cover us. So a lot of those ones turn into this reluctant kind of almost sometimes resentful engagement, and I hate that, because it's actually. GRC is a really awesome, wonderful thing, and it was intended as that true dashboard for all of your operations so that you can see exactly how well your functions are doing. And it turned into this checklist compliance monster where, certificates are issued and audit reports are written without much assessment. So it's a changing world, I think, right now, but I think we have to kind of, those who know about governance have to kind of keep the train on the rails as much as possible, as much as we can control.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, GRC has evolved, but the ultimate spirit of the letter is, why do we need GRC? Well, we need governance. Even if the two-people company are 20, 200, 2,000, 20,000, 200,000, the governance is what the fundamental, if you call it, the cornerstone for any company to survive and grow and scale. So that's why Even though the practices have changed, how we validate the compliance have changed, the evidence collection has changed, but that one thing has not changed: the foundation, the governance. If you don't know how to govern your company, you don't know how to govern yourself, you don't know how to govern your employees, you don't have the governance, you're always going to be in that situation, headless chicken.
Correct.
We don't want that. We don't want that for you.
Yeah, well said. So Victor, a lot of companies, they want SOC 2 and ISO 27001 so they can close deals, which makes TPRM, third-party risk management, a big factor. How should a 20-person or smaller company be thinking about third-party risk management in general?
Oh, my favorite topic, TPRM. So I have a lot of scars when it comes to TPRM. I manage the programs, but how do you manage 20 people? Sure, the weakest link rule. You might be secure, but is your payroll provider, is your CRM. A lot of time what I have heard and seen from us SMB, they're like, we're too small to actually go against Amazon's, Microsoft's, or Google as to like manage the third-party risk management. And that's not it. You're not going to manage or go against those companies. You're going to go and manage that little tiny integration that you are building with them to process your data. That's what you're after. So for a small company, TPRM is simple. No SOC 2, no data. That's simple. That's how I roll. For a smaller company, you don't have enough people to actually go and manage the whole program. Make a simple rule. Write it down on your notice board. Put it in front of every monitor. When you're processing your data, your company sensitive data, again, back to classification, not the public data, not something company event information. You don't need SOC 2 from that company who's providing you catering for your company event. No. Back to data classification. If it's a sensitive data, if the company cannot produce SOC 2, no data. If a vendor is going to touch your customer data or sensitive data, whatever the critical data that you are actually holding and that bringing you money or revenue, they must prove they have the same or better security standards than you do. So again, you're legally responsible for your data, even when it's on someone else's server. You are the initiator of that data. You are responsible for holding my data in your company. How you process that data to bring me the value is up to you. That includes the security. So simple rule, TPRM for SMBs, no SOC 2, no data. Karina, your opinions on that one?
I'm almost afraid to start because this is battle scars is a really great way to put it. So data classification, data mapping for AI, data structuring. Remember, your AI solution is also just another vendor, right? So there are cases where AI has lost company proprietary data. And then there's assumptions and lawsuits that happen, right? So you have to provide instructions for your people on what is okay to put into AI and what is not okay to put into AI. The biggest, so we have over 80% of the US population has been involved in a healthcare breach, according to HHS OCR. I think this should be a national emergency because this is our most important critical data about our kids and about our parents and about our siblings and how we hate our bosses or how we're alcoholics or how we smoke too much or we're too heavy and the drugs that we're on, all that information leaking gets sold also to the pharmaceutical companies, right? I mean, so we have to be, as consumers, we have to be conscious about our own privacy. But as companies who have consumer data or health data or credit card data, who we choose to do business with from a vendor perspective, we have to get much, much better at vetting them out. And right now we're completely missing that. Now, I'm not talking about the 1,200 questionnaires because the coffee guy who delivers cups into your pantry does not need one of those, right? So tiering your vendors to 4 is always a really good actually way to do it. To start with, how big of a questionnaire do they get? Don't send the same one to everybody. Just don't do that, right? And then And then being really stringent. We have one of these that happens right now. Legal gets the contract from the CTO, and at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. Assuming that the CTO has validated all of the technology stuff, and the CTO might be sending the legal the contract, going, well, they know what they're checking for about all the legalese stuff. And so now we have this situation where nobody's really checked for things like access control requirements, breach notification commitments, COI that has been verified, right? Transfer using subservice organizations, MUFG. If anybody's on the phone, several years ago came out and said, as part of our vendor management program, if you don't disclose your subservice organizations to us, we are not going to do work with you.
Mm-hmm.
God bless. I mean, that's a wonderful, wonderful position to take, right? So now remember, when you get that SOC 2 from your vendor, the very top will probably say subservice organizations are excluded from this report.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that even if that vendor sends you their SOC 2, where that vendor sends your data, right? That's a conversation you have to have. I could go on and on about this. Sorry, we're down to 10 minutes.
One thing I would say when TPRM is in question, say your company is evaluating a vendor, it's good to talk to the business leaders or whoever requested the evaluation and say, does this need to work out or not? Or are you really open to hearing our feedback? Because there's times where people like us put in a bunch of work to make this go well. And then we find something that's not good. We report it back and they're like, we're still going to use it anyway. We really like their interface. And it's like, I just wasted a lot of time. And now you're looking at me like I'm the bad guy because I represented our company well, and I asked them the hard questions, and it didn't come out well. So if you ask that ahead of time, you can kind of play it more appropriately.
And almost, I'm sorry, want to quickly add, so my approach is always prove to me why you need to send this data to them. Show me the business function that requires you passing this data to this vendor. And if you can prove that to me, let's have that follow-up discussion. Many times, surprisingly, that data doesn't even need to go to the vendor. They're like, you know what? Never mind. They're going to still do their processing, even if we send them a fraction of everything. They just kind of want everything just to have everything. And this is where the snowball starts happening with our data losses, right? So just be that devil's advocate and ask, why is it that I have to send that data to that vendor, and see what happens? Because maybe the end result is going to be we don't even need to send it.
Well said. We're down to the final two questions, getting towards the end, so we have to keep these on the quicker side. So, Karina, say a small business, they deal with their cyber risk and compliance because they need to close the big deal. Okay, great. How do they keep things from regressing over time as people change and priorities shift?
They have to really be committed to healthy habits inside their company and very persistent operational controls. They have to hire someone or bring somebody in that's going to be responsible for going to those competency areas and pulling that evidence, whether the evidence is gathered systemically. So, I mean, I know we have, GRC engineering is a really big thing that's come up. If you can go out and grab that confirmation that says, yes, the data is backed up once a week without a human touching it, rock on, right? Just make sure that it goes into that evidence folder on a continual basis. It really is a very core cultural commitment that you're making to maintain compliance. If you don't want to do it, if you can't, if you're too technical, we get hired by CISOs that are super duper technical. They just don't want to do compliance. Okay, well, let's figure out how we can work together so that we can help you be successful with the controls you're already working on. Because you're already doing a whole bunch of stuff. Your perimeter controls, your IDS, all of your stuff that you're doing, huge, super crazy, amazing stuff. Let's figure out how to document that and gather that evidence for it.
Yeah, and I'll add just one thing, especially in SMB space, when you are talking about security or you're talking about GRC, try to refrain from the statements like we had vulnerability and patches and all that. Talk about, if we don't do this, then we're going to have an outage for 3 days and we'll lose revenue for $1 million. that will hit the mark for everybody in an SMB.
Yeah.
Very well said. All right, we're on to our big final question. We'll go first again with Karina, so we can give Dr. Monga the last say on this one. Karina, so what's the top cyber risk and compliance tip you'd give to a startup or SMB today?
Know where your data is. That's it. It all starts there. That's the heartbeat.
Yeah, that's well said. And I'm actually dealing with this with 2 companies literally within the past 8 hours, going through scoping. And yeah, it's that important. Like, it sets the foundation for success. So that's an awesome one. Victor, what do you have to add?
Well, +1, what Karina said, and automate the boring stuff. Startups move too fast for manual compliance. Exactly what Karina said, have the evidence folders whenever the data is moved or in and out. If you're manually checking who has access to AWS every month, you'll forget.
Right.
First of all, you won't be even doing it. I'm sorry. I know SMB space. I have worked almost with 100 plus SMBs. You are not manually checking it. You might say that on the checkbox, but you're not doing it. So not even you will forget, you are not even doing it. Use automated compliance platforms. Try to use the new wave of AI coming this way, and it's staying. Use that. Automate it as much as possible. So most of the GRC evidence checking, access controls, the controls that you need to validate, again, audit ready state at all times, have that automated as much as possible. Yes, there's going to be 30, 40, 50%, whatever that you can't. That's the thing that you will actually hire smart people like Karina and Mike and really use their knowledge in your advantage.
Yeah.
In 2026, if your security isn't set it and forget it, and you are being informed about when bad things are happening and actions are taken automatically on your behalf already, you are behind the curve. And that goes for GRC as well. Audit ready state, use automation as much as possible. So I'll leave you with all of you with this one. Automate the boring stuff that you're not doing it today and you consider boring. Automate it as much as possible so you are at the audit ready state.
Very well said, Victor. So Victor, do you have any other final statements, and where can the audience find you?
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of ground here. And again, for most of my SMB listeners out there, I know GRC is not top of your mind, but try to ingrain that, chip away a little bit every day, and you will see that audit ready state will really help you when you want to achieve that compliance state. So where people can find me on LinkedIn, I'm very active on that one, and love to connect with my audience here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And we've done content previously, and it was a really good experience. So everyone check out Victor's content as well when you can. It covers a lot of different related topics. Karina, how about you? And any final words, and where can people find you?
People can find me on LinkedIn, clevercompliance.com, Karina at clevercompliance.com. Closing thoughts. Please lower your digital footprint. Keep your kids offline. Do not put pictures or videos of them up there. Identity theft, virgin social security numbers are a big thing. Nobody needs to know what your living room looks like, or where you went on vacation, or what your puppy's name is, or where the kids are going to school, or what they're doing after school and where they are. So we all think that only great people look at our social media feed and they have hearts in their eyes when they look at your wonderful little ones. Of course, we all love them. But just like the good guys are looking, the bad guys are looking too, and trying to establish patterns. Just don't make it easy for them. Just don't. You want to send me a picture of your kid? I'd love to get it, and send it to me via text. It's a little safer than putting it out there in the world. So that's my closing thought for the day. I know the holidays are over us, and I kind of hit a boiling point when I saw the LinkedIn feed just full of children, and it's like, why? But I'm glad we're over with that. So enjoy your family, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Well said, Karina, and always a pleasure to collaborate with you. For everyone that joined in today, thanks so much for joining us. We know you have a lot of other things to do. On Monday, we're going to be announcing the March event, and it's a fantastic guest and a topic that's really hard to manage, whether you're in the U.S. or in Europe. So that might give you a hint what this could be about, but we got to keep you waiting around for more. So we'll talk about that on Monday. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.